Hi, Ben. Hi, Steve. Hi, Vicky. Great. Okay, so we'll just wait for a few more people to join.
Good.
It's great the chat's working because we are going to invite you to ask questions as we're going along. Even though we do have an awful lot to cover, do pop your questions in. Hello, Aberdeen. Hi, Lee. Hi, Brian. Hi, Keith. Good to see. Hi, Wayne. Good to see lots of different people here, so that's great. So it's 4:30, so should we kick off?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So thank you, everybody, for attending. It's good of you all to come along, and I hope you're all well. So I'm going to start by introducing George, who's joining us today. So George, hi.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. Just a brief introduction. My name is George Cooper. I work very closely with Faith over at Fast Brand, and my role really is to work as a marketing strategist. And so what that means is to basically help working on the fundamental strategy behind marketing campaigns, make sure that they've got a goal, make sure that everything's focused towards that goal, think about data and analytics. And so, yeah, I mean, Faith brought me along today, I think, really because we wanted to talk about how advisors can think about marketing strategy, digital marketing in this sort of unusual time that we'll find ourselves in. I think that's a little bit of a brief intro there.
Thanks, George. Yes, so we wanted to tackle a big meaty topic today. Lots of advisors, as with lots of other businesses, are radically transforming what they do at this current time. People are already getting to grips with things like Zoom, email, videos, some people are doing. And lots of advisors will already have things sorted out for current clients in an online capacity. So, for example, they'll have things available for them via a portal, and a lot of that stuff will already be online where possible. But we want to kind of tackle the bit in between. So what happens to people who are trying to bring in new clients to their business? How do they connect with people who might need to review their financial planning at this time of immense change? There's a huge opportunity there for people to speak to a real person, people who might be nervous, re-looking at themselves, to reset their priorities. This is a unique event. It's given lots of people a chance to think about themselves in a new way, think about family, think about their financial situation. So not to seem mercenary, but there is an opportunity here to appeal to those people who previously might have been comfortable with doing this online, but now don't feel comfortable with going via robo-advice or something where they're not going to ever speak to a human being, because this bizarre event that we've had has shown that this can happen, and you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you don't have someone to talk to. So I think there's a huge opportunity for people online in the advice world to offer that personality to people who are looking for it. So that's the idea behind this. So we want to give you your solutions to this today, help you to sort of create a digital marketing practice, really, so that you can run your practice in that way now, but also once the pandemic's over. So, George, can you just add a little bit to that and talk about what we're trying to achieve today from your point of view?
Yes. I think when I think about digital marketing, for advisors, for planners, really for everyone, but certainly in a personal service, is that it's actually taking the process of relationship building, things that people do already, the way that people at the moment take someone that they meet, that they network with, and then basically take them from being a prospect to being someone who becomes a client, and taking that same process, if you like, but putting it online, making it remote, making it digital, and making it scalable. That's really, at its core, I think that's what we're talking about here. And the thing I wanted to say about this is that I don't really see this as a sort of substitute or like a sort of poor alternative, if you like, that would work in these strange circumstances, but really is something which is less desirable, perhaps, than actually the traditional methods of relationship building and marketing yourself in person. I think actually what we're going to see coming out of this period is a lot of change. And what we'll be looking to see probably is a more of a blend of digital and personal marketing and sales and relationship building in the sector. And so when we think about that, that's what we're doing. We're transferring it online. And I think a lot of people will want to continue this after the current circumstance returns more to normal, because the main advantage, as I see it, in terms of using digital marketing as an advisor, is that it's far more scalable than networking, than getting in the car, than going to places. Because, it seems silly to spell it out, but you can only be on the phone with one person at a time. You can only be in a room with so many people. But when you're using digital marketing effectively to build relationships online, when you're using things that are personal, like webinars or, using your website effectively, you can speak to hundreds, thousands of people at once. And you can be doing it 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, while you're sleeping, it's working for you. So that's really the fundamentals, as I see it, is transferring a lot of what people are already doing and just helping them put that online and do something similar as a blend of digital and personal stuff.
Yep. I think the point also to make is that previously this might have felt very impersonal. It might have felt like an online version of something that is much, much better in person. And we're not trying to replace that in-person aspect. But I think that what we've seen over the past few weeks and what I've heard is that lots of people are actually quite impressed by how intimate you can be online. Even though you're only seeing this part of someone's face and body, you can still convey a lot. You've got a lot of body language capabilities there, and it can be quite personal. And I think that's the key difference. And I picked something up on a call with a group of advisors this week, which comes back to your point about scale, George. So advisor who is based in Glasgow mentioned that he'd recently picked up a client on the South Coast. And that was done because that client had seen him on LinkedIn. He'd also seen him on social media. And so that's the first point, is that, this is the world's your oyster. The UK is your oyster with this stuff, if you can get more of it online. But also the onboarding process is a lot slicker, because if someone then comes to you and has a Zoom call with you, there's no jump in consistency there. It's more of the same. So they've already experienced you online. Now they're seeing you in that capacity. And this advisor was able to say, look, this is where people can see the whites of my eyes. They can probably see more of me close up than they would in an office. So it's actually a little bit more intimate. So that just made me think about the fact that even though previously we may have seen these digital options as poor relations, they actually can be a lot more personal and a lot more suitable for people who are already, as we all are now, used to dealing with this in this way with all sorts of different kinds of communications. So I think the point we're making is that it's not just a nice to have, it's something that can really help and has the potential to dramatically change your business and change the scope of it and the potential for it if you do it properly. So now we want to kind of kick off by talking about the stage that we find lots of advisors are at when they come to this at this point. Can you talk us through a little bit of that, George?
Yes, absolutely. Typically what we tend to see with advisors in terms of the marketing that they already do in the digital space is that it's a little bit of a sort of mess, if you like. It's all disjointed and siloed. You've probably got a website over here, or a Facebook page over here, or a LinkedIn page here, a personal or a company page. There's maybe emails, there's maybe blog posts, but it's not really all joined up, if you like. And it's not really in what we would call a funnel. It doesn't all work towards a specific end. And a more strategic, and if I dare say more sort of intelligent strategy for digital marketing has a very clear goal in mind. And usually that is to get someone to book a consultation call. So it looks something a little bit like this. I'm going to share my screen so you can see that a little bit bigger. So you should all be able to see that now. And this will be an example of what a very simple funnel would look like for a financial advisor. And so we have attraction, the first phase, which is where we're bringing people in to your website, to your content. We have the website. We have this phase we call the consideration phase, when people learn about you more, they understand the service, they understand the benefits to them, they understand why it might be of use to them. And ultimately this leads to the conversion. And the conversion is just a word we use for getting the person who's gone through our digital marketing system to actually achieve the result we want. And in this case, it's almost always an initial consultation call or an initial consultation meeting. So that's really what, in an abstract sense, it looks like, and we're trying to get away from seeing various different activities and bring it all together and get them all to compound, because that's where the return really is. And typically, unfortunately, we see that many people are slightly disheartened with digital marketing, or they're very skeptical about it, because they might have put some effort and time into, writing some blog posts or some social work, or maybe some search engine optimization, or maybe they've even played around with Facebook ads. But because it's not all joined up, typically there hasn't been much of a return on that investment. And so I think that's what we need to address first, Faith, if that makes sense. It's how those things join together.
Yes, I think it's the case. Yeah, lots of people might be ticking the box and they'll be just doing the bare minimum, but that's almost it's not worse, but it's not using its full potential. There's a whole load of things that you could be doing to use these channels their best advantage and make them work a lot harder for you. And that's what we mean. And also going back to my previous point, people are now suddenly over the past 4 weeks a lot more comfortable with digital techniques and online techniques. Your dad's Zooming, your granny's house partying. Everybody is now au fait with this. So there's almost a new level of expectation from clients. Once we come out of the pandemic, I think people will be in a different mode and they'll be expecting different communications from their providers. So this is where you can meet them in a way and up your game. And this sort of just forces you to do that. And as we're trying to say, it enables you to then leave a lot of this stuff as it is now and help your business as you move forward. So all this work that you'll now do, hopefully, it will stand the test of time and advance you more long term. So that's why we're keen to help you with that stuff. So what we're talking about? Yes. So you're going back to your nice, neat funnel, George. So this is what we're trying to create with this webinar. So where do we start? How do we get cracking?
So basically, the first thing is to think about your website. And that is kind of a bit of a prerequisite, if we like, for digital marketing activity. I would typically say if you haven't got the basics of your website sorted, then there's not much point in investing time and money into the digital marketing world, because the reason for that is that the website is like your hub online. It is the representation of yourself, your firm, on the internet. It's the home for your content. We'll come back to content in a second. So it's really important. And so what I mean by that is, the website is a place you're going to be found. It's where you're going to be found on Google. It's where you're going to be found at the end of the funnel. It's also where people are likely to actually convert, that word conversion. They like to do that on the website because they're likely to literally fill out the form that leads to a consultation. So that has to be sorted. And a couple of things to think about there are, for example, is your website mobile responsive? And again, many people will have this sorted, but if you haven't, these are things to think about. 52% of traffic comes from mobile devices. And if your site doesn't work properly or very effectively on a mobile device or on a tablet, then you're losing half your traffic. So those kind of things are really important. But secondly, in this slide here, you can see the website needs to be refreshed and current and updated. It needs to be updatable because people need to be confident, both existing clients and prospects, when they go there, that they're seeing the latest information, not something that's 5 years old. So, your team should be current, but also that you just saw in the previous slide was like a banner for the COVID-19 situation. It's a great place to have current and fresh content. And as you can see here, again, it's where the CTA, where the conversion will happen. It's where the form will be. And it's your hub for your content. It's where blog content will sit. It's where other forms of content will sit. So that's kind of, most or many advisors will have that sorted already, but it's just worth us saying that that's probably the first step, is make sure that your site is ready to receive leads and ready to be the end point. And the other final thing I would say is you want to be able to have hidden pages on your site. This is really important, what we call landing pages. So sometimes the end result of digital marketing activity will be to drive people to the home page, but sometimes actually it will be to drive them to a specific page. And that's because the people who are coming, the leads that are coming through, want to see a certain type of content that's more relevant to them. So that's important. So if you can do those things, then that's great. But that would be the first thing, just in case anyone isn't sort of at that stage already, if that makes sense.
An example of that would be the page that we created for people to sign up for this webinar, for example. That is a page specifically designed for that piece of activity. So all of that activity that's happening around social is being driven towards this one place.
Yeah, one other example, just while we're on that, is a landing page for introducers. If you have introducers who are sending you leads, then you want to have a page which is trackable, so you know which leads have come from the introducers. But also, if you're coming through your accountant, frankly, there might be some information which is more relevant for people, leads who've come through them. So, these kind of things are important and worth thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how do we attract people to the website?
Okay. So this is the first step once you've got the site running, really, is that, many of us will have a fancy site or a beautiful site or a great site, but no one comes to it. It would be like creating a load of billboards and just leaving them in your house. You have to get eyeballs to your content. And again, that might sound very obvious, but it's important to talk through it sort of step by step. And the way you do that is content marketing. You might have heard this term before. Faith mentions it quite a lot. And content marketing is where you have content which attracts people, which brings people in, content that is relevant, content that people are interested in, that gets people's attention, that gets their interest, and that's what's going to drive them there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but how do you get people to come to the content?
Right. Okay, sorry, I didn't really finish the point there. So yes, absolutely, you're completely right, Dave. So there are several ways in which people actually will find that content, and the content will draw them in, if you like. So the most obvious example is going to be through Google. So let's start there. Let's start with search engine. And many of you might have heard of this term, search engine optimization. Some of you might have already invested in this and may be very familiar with it. But basically, at its core, we are all asking Google questions and putting queries in all of the time. And Google is looking to find a relevant answer for those questions and direct people to them. So I'll give you an example. So one of the clients that Faith works with is provides a lot of advice to teachers, head teachers, independent teachers, and the like. So, these are examples of some questions that people will be asking Google. How are teachers' pensions calculated, not cancelled, etc. And what we can do is do an analysis and work out what in your particular niche, which is relevant to you, what is also likely to be the first service that people are buying from you. What are people searching for? What questions are they asking Google? What terms what keywords, as we call them, are they putting into Google? And if you create content which answers those questions, which is going to be relevant to people searching those terms, and it's a bit more complicated than that, but broadly speaking, Google is going to direct people towards you. Now, there is a whole science to this, and we haven't really, for the purpose of this webinar, get time to get into backlinks and authority and all of the things that make that up. But suffice to say, the first thing that content can do is get you found on search engines. And if you're creating relevant content, especially for niches, it's very, very hard to rank for a broad search term like teachers' pensions or a broad search term like financial planning for doctors. But it's much easier to rank for mortgages for locum doctors. I mean, so the more specific we are and the more we hit certain goals, then content is going to help get us found on search engines. So that's one of the first ways, but there are more ways actually, Faith. But does that...
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a good point about the niche thing, because I think people are still nervous about being very particular and very specific, but it's much better to appeal to or convert 10 people than appeal to 100 people and not convert any of them. So it sounds risky and it seems like you're leaving a lot of money on the table, but you're not. You're actually appealing and getting through much more quickly to the people that you want, because you've targeted them very, very specifically with that content. But it's not just written content we're talking about, is it, George?
No, I mean, there's lots of different types of content, and we can talk for days about this. But there's audio content, podcasts, there's video, posts that people put on LinkedIn in the forms of video or just general social media posts. There's a whole plethora of content that you can create, and all of those have their own different advantages. They're likely to appeal to different audiences. And the thing to think about when you think about the kind of content that you would be creating is also to think very much about your own circumstances, your own ideal prospects, your own niche that you service. If you were looking to service high net worth millennial entrepreneurs who are digital and globe-trotting, then you probably look to be at content for places like Instagram. And but obviously that would be laughable for people looking to service clients in their 60s and 70s and deal with entirely different niche, and therefore they want a different type of content. So those things to bear in mind. But the other thing to bear in mind is, Google is the #1 search engine in the world, but many people don't know that YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world. So when you start thinking outside the box, there can be a lot of value to producing content for social media, can be producing content perhaps on podcasts or just appearing on them. And so, when you put all that together, it's good to create a plethora of content. It's not just about writing blogs and emails. There's lots you can create.
That's all great, but it still does sound like an awful lot of work. If you're doing a video and you're doing a blog post and you're doing a podcast, how do you make that more efficient? Because there is a way of doing that, isn't there?
Well, yes, there is. And so typically, it's a bit of a naff name, but I call it the content multiplier effect. Well, you know where it comes from. But the idea being that you can take a single piece of content and essentially sort of spend it multiple times. You get more value out of that piece of content. So, for example, if you've taken the time to write a blog post, you can turn that blog very easily into an email. But it can also be turned into a post for social media. It could even be turned into a video. You could literally take the themes in that and turn it into a video. You could turn it into a webinar. So if you're going to take the 90% of the effort is researching and writing and sitting down and creating the original piece, creating little pieces from it is easy. So to look at an example for that, this was a blog post on a website for a client about how to be safe online, avoid scams in the COVID-19 situation, which is very important information for a lot of people. Take that and turn that into little posts for Twitter, for Facebook, that's easy. And so that's really the way you do it without spending so much of your time doing this, is to, have a regular period every 2 weeks or every week or every month where you sit down and you create something that's going to bring people to your site. And then from there, create lots of little pieces. That's the way to do it, really. Otherwise, you spend your whole life making content and no time actually doing any work. So that's really the way to think about it, is this content multiplier effect, if you like.
And that helps to show up online more regularly, because the idea is that you're supposed to be online as much as possible, not too much, but not so little that you only get seen once a month and then you get forgotten about. You want to be seen in the feed as much as possible, but not being repetitive and not being boring. And this content multiplier effect is a way of doing that. Absolutely. So that's really good. But what if you only have a few followers on social media? What if it's just like your mum and your friend? What do you do then?
Okay, so this would probably be the main other way of generating leads, of getting your content out to new prospects other than on Google. And that would be to advertise. So if you only have a few hundred followers, let's say on LinkedIn, or a few connections or a few followers on Twitter and the like, there may not be a huge amount of point for you just putting out content to that audience, because many of those audience will already be your existing clients, etc. But what you can do is you can, what we call, boost that content. It's called media buying. It's again a big topic. But one of the things to think about is, if you're creating this content, this attraction content that's going to bring people out, who do you want to get it in front? And you can spend money, advertising spend, to get that content in front of people on platforms like Facebook or on LinkedIn. And of course, everyone uses Facebook. Business people use Facebook, people use LinkedIn. So there's different channels for different audiences, but you can choose things and make sure it gets in front of the right people. So you can discriminate in terms of things like occupation, or choose you want to hit your advertisement at people who have a certain income or they're in a certain location. So if you want to target young doctors between 25 and 35 who make a certain amount of money, who are all in northern England, I don't know, in Newcastle or something, you can do that. You can literally refine it to be that precise. So that would be the other step, would be you're creating this content. The first thing I would say is get that content on your website, because you're going to get the SEO value of that. But the next step would be consider putting it on social media and consider boosting it. Consider creating little ad campaigns and putting it out there.
And you can be quite controlled about the amount of money you spend on this, can't you? So it doesn't have to be an awful lot of money. And am I right in thinking the more specific you are about the audience, the cheaper it is, because they may not be as valuable to certain other sectors as they are to you? Absolutely.
Whenever I run these campaigns, I try and get it as tiny as possible in a way. It might start off with a little bit of big number of people, but as soon as you realize who's clicking, you go laser focused on the people who are engaging with it. And you can get to a point where you're spending a few pounds a day, literally, and actually you're getting quite a lot of engagement for that once you know exactly who to target and what content to give them. It might take a little bit of time to experiment, but this is not thousands of pounds, far from it. You can do this sort of advertising for a couple of £100 worth of budget. You just got to know how to do it and who to target and what content to give them. But if you get it right, you can get a really good return on investment. So absolutely, it's not like creating a radio ad. It's very, very affordable. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's great. So you've done all that activity up here. You've got your website down here. You're luring people in. What do you do next?
So if we think back to the sort of relationship building analogy, it's very much continuing that relationship building. So if we think back, we've brought people in through content, whether they found us on Google, whether they found us through YouTube or social media or LinkedIn or through an advertising campaign online, we brought them to our site. We need to find a way of continuing that relationship. And the best way to do it is to get a contact detail, effectively, to get an email address. There are other ways of doing it, about retargeting with adverts and things, but really, for the purposes of most people listening, the most cost-effective and also the best way to keep in touch with people is just going to be by email. So you need to get their email address when they're reading, and then you need to continue the relationship building after that. Because most people don't go to a website, they're interested in a piece of content, but they're probably not likely to book a consultation with you straight away. They're more likely to book a consultation with you 2 weeks or maybe even 3 months down the line. And it's just making sure you continue that relationship building. Just as you would meet someone at an event, give them a business card, take their number, follow up with them many days and weeks, months later. So that's the next step, is capture more details and continue the relationship.
But how do you get their email? They're not just going to give it to you for nothing.
Well, not anymore. It used to be easy. It's much, much harder to get people's email now. And of course, you also have to think about data protection and GDPR and the rules around handling data for marketing purposes. So it seems like a minefield. It is actually very doable. You just got to make sure you get it right. So to get someone's email address when they're on your website, you should use what you call a content magnet. And many people might have heard of this already. And what you're doing is you're exchanging your email address or their email address for something valuable. So if we take the example of teachers and teachers' pensions, someone might have searched on Google, they found an article you've written about that's relevant to them, they're reading this article, and before they go, you go, whoa, before you leave, get our free guide, or how about this helpful guide, and it's a 6-page PDF or something on pension transfer for teachers, for example. Just to take that as an example, you're giving them something valuable. It could be a checklist, it could be a PDF document, it could be a video series, but it's not just give me your email so I can email you, it's give me your email and we'll send you something valuable in return. And so that's what you do, and then basically send someone something valuable. And that you don't have to do that yourself. You don't physically have to email them. That can all be automated. So they go to your website, they put their email into a box, and they get something in return, and you start to build up a list that way.
Okay, so this email list is really, really, really valuable.
Yes.
But lots of people have been saying that email's old hat, or email seems to be the sort of embarrassing uncle of channels to some people.
I couldn't disagree more. I'm afraid it's just wrong. Email it might not seem flashy or sophisticated, but email is not old hat. I mean, email is in let's say high value niches, which financial services is undoubtedly an example of. Email is really powerful, really, really powerful, because it just has a very high return on investment. And certainly in the B2B world, it has the highest return on investment of any marketing activity, hands down. It's very affordable to do on a regular basis in the way that sending posts to just isn't. And other forms of marketing, even advertising on Facebook and LinkedIn, they all cost money, whereas email doesn't. Once you've got the list, it's very cost effective to scale that. But, it's just a good way of getting into people's inboxes regularly. It's a fantastic way to continue a conversation. And to do that digitally, wherever they are in the world, at no cost, is something that every business should be doing. And remember, in fact, email marketing isn't just about prospects. I mean, this is something to say, and you mentioned in the last webinar, Faith, email marketing is really powerful for existing customers because it's a great way to hear from people. Want to hear from their advisor, and they want to hear from their advisor regularly. You probably don't want to hear from Argos about a discount on fridges or something, but you do want to hear valuable things about your finances, about advice, about what's going on in the world. And to be able to do that on a scale that you can't do by just sending individual emails or individual phone calls or following up in that way is really valuable. And I also think it's just worth saying, when we're talking about this email marketing for existing customers, but also for prospects, this is not email marketing in the traditional sense of emailing lists, through Outlook and that kind of thing. It's about using an email marketing system, software, that personalizes emails, that changes the name for each recipient, that tracks who opens, who's engaged, who's clicking on the links, that can create sequences and things. So there's a lot of sophistication to email marketing. It's not a dead channel. In fact, I would say it's the most valuable channel. It's a good channel meaning at the highest return on investment. I'm absolutely confident in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got their email address. You've got a really good list now, very, very valuable list. What will you do with that list?
So, well, the first thing is you will slightly segment it. And again, stop me if I'm getting too complicated here, because you're going to send different emails to your existing customers than you want to prospects. Prospects who come from certain landing pages, maybe they've come from introducers, will get different sort of emails to people who've come through a Facebook ad. Someone going for one-off is going to be different. And many advisors, of course, have different audiences. So the content aimed at a doctor is going to be totally different to a content aimed at an entrepreneur or a business owner. So all of that has to be thought about. But basically, you're going to send them personal stuff, going to be varied stuff, but you're continuing that relationship building. You're talking about what you do, why it matters, why it's important, your values, the values of your firm. Maybe you send them a case study. You take them through how someone like them, someone they can relate to, has been helped and their life has been profoundly changed by good financial planning, why that's important. And the idea of that is that someone who's stumbled across you through your attraction content, got onto your website, is going to continue that relationship, continue to learn. And as they consider and think about, is this actually something for me? This consideration phase, they're going to go, oh, hold on, actually, I can really see the value of that. That's basically what you're trying to do. And at the same time, I trust this person, or I trust this company, I trust this group of people, they're personal, etc. And then that's what's going to lead to conversion. So if that makes sense, it's about being varied, it's about being regular, it's about being helpful and informative, and just sending them communications that way. And ultimately, you then want to push them to a conversion, which is, at the end of sending them a few emails, you go, oh, and by the way, if you think this will be something of value to you, please reach out to me. Let's have a consultation call. You can book it here, and by then people are much more primed basically to buy from you.
Yes, I think, if you keep giving that really, really good quality content, personalized content,
Yes.
it's you then have developed a relationship with people where they get to know you almost, and they appreciate what you're sending them because they instantly see that you're not Argos. And also they're learning more about you and your value. So for the current client, they're learning about the fact that you as an advisor are doing all that reading, doing all that work on your behalf. If they only used to seeing you twice a year, they actually might not know what you do the rest of the time. So this is a way of being able to evidence that. And they might not click on that market update, but they just want to know that you've read it. Or they might want to just get a feel for your interpretation of what they've already seen on the BBC or in the Financial Times. So it's a huge opportunity for you to add your value and disseminate all of that value that's in your head and that you provide face-to-face, chopped up into tiny bits over the course of, a year, once a month or once a week or whatever. So, it does give you a platform then to say something like, please, would you refer me? Or something that's slightly more salesy if you wanted to turn up the heat at any point. So you've got them on your email list, you're nurturing them, they're at that consideration phase, they're learning about you, they're consuming all of this really, really helpful information, they're really getting to know, like, and trust you. They're at the bottom of the funnel now, they're so hot, they're sweaty, they're ready to buy.
Yes.
What should you do to your website to make sure that it's ready to convert them as quickly and easily as possible?
Okay, well, it's all about making it easy for them to complete that. And again, this is going to change massively for different people, but it's about using forms intelligently. It's about making sure that you have perhaps a calendar so that when someone wants to book a consultation with you, you can click through and they can book a time that syncs with your calendar, and it's just easy, it's simple. Maybe you send them an email if it's an in-person meeting with a map, and all of this can be automated and simplified. But the other thing actually, Faith, is that if you're doing a lot of digital marketing, you might get really quite large numbers of leads. And so when you think about that, often what people want to do is make sure that they're qualifying those leads. And what that means is that they're getting the right people. So if you're getting hundreds of people coming through your site, you can use forms and things to make sure that you categorize people. You go, this person fits the criteria I really want to work with, or I can segment this and maybe offer a different service, a robo-advice service, for example, or just a less high ticket service to someone else. So, and again, all of that can be automated. So it's just about making it easy for someone to take that step of buying from you, and also to make it easy for you to follow up with the people you want to, and not waste your time, frankly, with people who are not really right. They're not the right fit, And again, you can design a form or a system or a booking system that actually eliminates a lot of that hassle, basically, which you're going to want to do if you're getting a lot of leads through, because you may get a much higher volume, frankly, than you would, pounding the tarmac, getting in the car and networking personally.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just having a look at the questions, and we just had a question from Sajad. Thank you for your question. Sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong. Could you please share your thoughts on the use of MailChimp customized email templates for client marketing?
Yeah, do you want me to add that?
It could do. I like them. I know what you think about MailChimp. You don't like it quite as much as me, but I do think it's nice visually for clients to get it's a really professional way of putting stuff together in that traditional newsletter format. So you've got an introduction, you've maybe got, something more cultural, you've got a link to a market update. It enables you to create a really nice looking piece of communication that looks consistent every time you send it, that people get used to seeing. What are your thoughts, George?
Absolutely. I just think the only thing that email's going through a period where it's becoming a little bit less colourful. And so when it's done right and it's tasteful, I think it's great. And I just think it's about making sure that, I'm not saying that people don't have taste, but it's about making sure that it's just not full of images. And one of those reasons is that actually sometimes your spam filter, your clients will just spam the email if it's full of images. So absolutely, it's about being subtle and getting it right, absolutely. But sometimes less is more, I think.
Okay, so we haven't covered data yet. How do you use your data to make the funnel work better for you?
I'll just be quick, Faith, because then we can do some Q&A as well to finish that off. But absolutely, so data is a massive topic again. We hear a lot about data, big data, and people want to know how they can incorporate that into their marketing on a reasonable way, in a scale, in a way that they understand. And the truth is that throughout all digital marketing activity, throughout the funnel, you're collecting data at every point. Who's clicking? Who's watching? Who's engaging? Who's opening your emails? Who's going to your site? The analytics on the site can tell you a lot if you know what to look for. Who's searching for what terms, and look at the search engine side of things. So there's a lot of value there, potentially. And from there, when you know what to look for, you can then basically decide and refine your funnel, refine the activity you're doing, double down on things that are really working, and then hold back on things that aren't working so well, effectively. So yeah, it's all about using data, collecting it, and doing it in a way that you just, to make objective decisions, if you like, and to make decisions that are very rational, and sit back and you can go, well, we can't argue about it. This is what the numbers say. This is what works. This is what doesn't work. And then you can, go, well, actually, you know what? I'm getting I've got a leads through referrals and introducers. Let's see what I can do to open more opportunities there. Or I'm getting a lot of leads through Facebook. Let's just double down on that and spend some more money there and see what happens. So it's about really, the data element is about refining it going forward. And the beauty of that is it then begins to compound. And over time, frankly, the way that you bring people into your practice becomes more efficient, you get higher return on investment, and it just becomes better. And so, it's sort of like an anti-fragile system, if you like. It just becomes better over time. That's really the main value of data. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once we get to the end of this and we've used all of these tools, what does amazing look like? What are we aiming for here for advisors?
Well, we had that funny slide, didn't we? So I think we've got to try and think a little bit outside the box and try and think about what are the advantages of this kind of new, more hybrid world that we're probably entering into, strange circumstances that have brought it about. But what can advisors take that's going to be good from a lifestyle point of view, from a flexibility point of view? What we're getting to is a period where instead of being on the road all the time, can you take a lot of that and get that relationship building, that networking, bringing prospects into people and turn it into something digital, turn it into something scalable? I mean, this is, I guess, the main point, which is that you have internet scale with digital marketing that you can't get through traditional marketing or through networking and prospecting in person. How can you use that to your advantage? And how can you use it, whether you're in a maintenance phase in your business, a sort of a lifestyle business, so to speak, or if you're in a growth phase and you're looking to expand, take on new advisors, you're quite ambitious in that sense. What I think amazing, if you like, looks like more flexibility, more freedom, more control over your business. You can do all of this stuff from your living room or from a beach in Thailand, in theory. It gives you a lot more control over your business. And I'll give you an example. I remember talking to a client who had in a situation where they were doing a lot of advertising on Facebook, and they got to a position where when they wanted more leads, they would just spend more money and on Facebook, and they'd have more leads coming in. And when they wanted to push it off for a month or a quarter, they would just turn that down. So, to be in that situation where they're not in a sort of feast and famine, where they do a lot of networking, they get a lot of leads, then they don't have much time to network, then they end up the famine. It's about getting a flow, getting consistency, getting more control, and getting more, more lifestyle factors that mean you're not traveling so much. I think those are the kind of advantages that people don't think of, is that by building this hybrid mix of in-person and digital marketing, I just think you have a very different looking practice day to day and a lot more control over what you do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, right, that's great. Thank you. Let's have a look at some of these other questions we have. So Audrey Wade is saying, what is the right level of investment on ongoing digital marketing for a financial planning firm? And what is a good return on investment?
Okay. It's very hard to, I'm not trying to cop out the question. It's a very hard question to answer without having a little bit more details. In terms of a good level of investment, again, it's going to depend on the niche. It's going to depend how expensive it is to get in front of that niche. And it's also going to depend on how many assets you have originally. Do you have a big list that's existing? Do you have a lot of information that we can use, etc.? And also, what resources do you have in-house in terms of time? Do you have a lot of resources you can use in terms, of creating content? Do you have a lot of time to do that, or do you need to outsource some of that? And that's going to be actually in many ways a big portion of the cost, is how much time you have to do this stuff yourself, how much expertise you have in-house, and how much has to be outsourced. But typically, you should be spending at least, as a general rule of thumb, 15% of top line, of everything, of all sales on marketing, if you're looking to grow in a growth kind of phase. And so that might seem like a lot to a lot of people, but as a typical idea, if you're looking to grow and expand rapidly, that's the sort of money you should be spending. But I'm afraid it's very hard to say, how much you can spend in any niche without learning a bit more. But if you want to send Faith an email, we can talk to you about a specific case, what that would look like, probably what a monthly budget would look like, depending on how many leads you need, what your ambitions are, what niche you're in. But I can't really answer that quite, right now. We need a little bit more context to get into that.
A lot of this cost will be upfront as well, won't it? And then ongoing, once you've got these systems in place, once you've got the content in place, it's then a question, it's more controllable, I guess, the cost after that, when you're looking at how much you want to dial up and dial down on your spend on ads, for example.
Yes.
Something like
that.
Yeah,
it's like you need to get the infrastructure in place. If you've got a great website already, then you don't need a new website. So that's perfect. If you've got, a mailing list set up, then that's already done. You've got to get your ducks in a row, if you like, to use a horrible phrase, and then go for it. But that's really good. Yeah, it's at that point you get to this beautiful sort of cadence where you can put it up and put it down. You kind of have some predictability as to what you're going to get when you invest in any given month, and that's a great position to be in.
Okay. Tom Skinner has got a good question here. What would a 5-step process be from a very basic starting point to build a good foundation before starting a structured campaign?
That's a really good question, Tom. I'm not sure I can put it in 5 steps necessarily, but so number one, do an audit of all your existing digital assets. How many names have you got on a list? Where are they? Are they in invoice software? Have you got a CRM with data in? Get all those people, get them into an email. There's a little bit of GDPR concerns about that, but it's possible to email your existing clients. So get all those people into a list and get emails out to them and start. That would be the first step. Do an audit of all your channels. How many followers do you have on certain channels? Where do you get engagement from? And see what you can learn from there. Also with people, so to do that kind of audit as a first step, the second step would be look at your website, think about some of the things we mentioned about mobile optimization, whether it works in different ways. Can you have hidden landing pages? Do you have analytics set up? That kind of thing. That would be the second step. Make sure you've got that house in order. Start looking and thinking about what kind of keywords you might want to be ranking for, what kind of content you want to be creating, what you enjoy creating. Start playing around with that. And then I would say start testing it. That would be probably my 4th step, if you like. Test. Maybe appear on someone's podcast, or, create a blog post. See if you enjoy writing that. Send that out to your existing customers. Get some feedback from it. Do they think it's good? That sort of thing. And maybe also, send a survey out to your existing customers. How did they find you? What was good about the onboarding process? What do they want to hear more about? Those would be the kind of first steps you want to do. But talk to us more. We're more than happy to do a free consultation with you if you wanted to get into some discussions about that.
I have been working with Tom, and we have been looking at that stuff, and we've been looking at, so the first thing that we started to do was looking at his client avatars. So who does he want to appeal to initially? Yeah. And he's got some really great avatars, so that's really, really helpful. So that is another foundation that I would add in, is that if you have already got a specific client in mind, and you do a lot of the hard work in investigating who they are, what sort of questions they'll be plugging into Google, what concerns they have, how you meet those concerns, etc., etc. That's a lot of the really good foundation work to do as well, because then you've got inside of your perfect client and get into character and almost imagine who they are and what they're looking for, and then give them all the answers that are already in your head, because you're already giving them those in with other clients, because that's what you're already doing. So we've got some more questions here. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay there, George. Okay. So another question here. Over time, we've invested lots of time and resources on Facebook and Instagram advertising. Is there a preferential social media platform that's quite succinct and targets the right audience? I have profiles on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Your thoughts on WhatsApp and Telegram, please, would also be much appreciated. So this again comes back to the client avatar. There's no point advertising or speaking to people on Instagram if most of your clients are in their 70s, I wouldn't say, because Instagram is not all, but it's younger, it's more visual, it's harder for financial services or a services provider to be visual on Instagram. It's quite a hard sell, that one. I've seen it a lot, and I've seen lots of advisors do it, and the engagement rate isn't very high, unfortunately. Whereas on Facebook, it's more of a given that your older demographic will be on there. Twitter just seems to be a lot of advisors talking to other advisors. I don't think it's really a place where clients expect to see their advisor giving them quality information. I might be wrong. That's just my experience of it, having looked at it quite a lot. And LinkedIn is obviously good if you've got business owner clients, because that's where they will be. And LinkedIn is also really good if you want to do advertising, isn't it? But not quite as good as Facebook. Is that right, George?
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's going to depend who you need to target. It's going to depend on what budget you have, and it's going to depend on what content you want to create. In terms of when you're saying WhatsApp and Telegram, are you talking about sort of chatbot type systems on WhatsApp? You can do that with Facebook. I'm not sure what you mean about that, or do you mean it as a recurring means of communication? Of course, Telegram is really secure, so it's a good way of communicating there, but I'm not sure from a marketing point of view. But yeah, it's going to depend. Again, I'm sorry to say, book a call with us. We'll talk to you about it. But these kind of questions are quite difficult to answer. But I would say, yeah, it's going to depend on your audience. If you're looking to deal with business people, it's going to definitely be LinkedIn. I can tell you that for sure. Facebook is a general good catch-all, and it's fairly cheap to advertise on. And Instagram, I would typically keep away from, unless you're thinking about dealing with millennials or a certain sort of demographic in that. Would be my initial thoughts. But yeah, very much the same as you, Faith, to be honest.
Here's another good question. Thanks for the questions, by the way, everybody. Would you say to financial advisors the market for us has moved on in general, basic outdated mechanisms of telephonic cold calling and advertising in newspapers and magazines? It's really interesting because the financial services industry is different, and it is slightly behind the times. And then to suddenly go all digital and all seeing, all dancing, social media, maybe too much as well. But as we said, we're finding that even before the lockdown, before COVID-19, silver surfers, older demographic, they are very, very trusting of online ways of communicating and advertising. Obviously, everyone is to a certain extent numb to a lot of advertising. But that's where the personalization comes in, and the authenticity, and knowing your client inside out and knowing what messages they want to hear. That's where the cut through comes from all of that. If you can get that right, then you will be ahead of the game, because not many advisors are dabbling in these sort of mechanisms. They're still sort of going through the traditional methods. I don't know if cold calling, I did actually speak to someone this afternoon and they were talking about cold calling. So it is obviously still a thing, but there are a lot more parameters around that, and a lot more people are, obviously skeptical of that approach. And the thing about social media is it's more eyeball to eyeball, and it enables you to be a lot more in somebody's face and personal. But you've got to use that to its advantage and respect it almost, and not go in there all guns blazing, selling. You've got to add value. You've got to be useful. You've got to provide engaging content, educational content. It's a different kind of advertising. It's a lot more subtle. And then every now and again, when you want to sell something, you can, because you've earned the right, because you've already proven yourself to be a trusted person, approachable, intelligent, with expertise, all of those things. So people are already trusting you, but you've got to, it's a slow burn. It's a slower game than just buy now. This is my ad. This is my fridge, 10% off.
Which is only for the next 2 hours.
Yes.
I mean, about relationships. I always find it fascinating. No one would come up to someone in a conference and go, "Hi, I'm Richard. This is what I do. Buy from me now." And no one would do that. And yet people start doing that online. And it's just about keeping the same principles that you would have if you were interacting with a normal human being offline, and bringing that online. I mean, that's the key thing there, I think. Yeah.
It is really. It's just more sort of intimidating, isn't it, when you're starting out, to suddenly start putting yourself online, and you don't want to start photographing your dinner and going too far. You want to maintain an air of professionalism, but getting that balance right is quite tricky, and it's something to think about before you start doing it, because consistency is also really key. So let's have a look at some other questions.
By the way, I dropped the link in the chat. If anyone wants to book a call with us, you can have a call there. We're more than happy to talk these things through further if there's something very personal.
Good idea,
So
because we are coming up to the end of our time soon.
yes.
Do put any more questions in if you've got any more. Wayne.
Yes,
hello,
Andrew,
Wayne.
we're recording, so that's fine.
Oh yeah, we
Sorry,
are recording. Yep, that's okay. Wayne sees far too many people spending time and money on marketing without having the building blocks in place. It's fair to say that the key is to know how you want to target and then work out how to target them. If you just have random followers or on whatever medium, whatever you reach out with won't work. Yeah, that's really true.
Absolutely correct. 100%.
Yeah, you really want to make sure your content filters out the people you do not want to work with. It has to be appealing to the people that you want to work with. And that's a lot of the hard work is done up front. And a lot of that hard work you won't see.
Sorry, Faith, there's a delay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm saying don't mistake for people who have done things where they haven't had that sort of those building blocks in place and they've tried something and thought, well, this hasn't achieved anything. It's not necessarily there's anything wrong with the content you've created. It's really, or anything that you're doing in that sense. It's just that if those building blocks aren't in place, you're right, it isn't going to get a return on investment. But don't lose heart in light of that, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And it is a slow burn, some of this stuff. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Indeed. Another question, Wayne, there.
Another question, Wayne. How do you ensure your spend on digital savvy clients isn't being wasted on clients that see no value in an advisor? The type of clients that take your info, your blogs, your ideas, and then go to Hargreaves Lansdown and buy direct. Very good point. Very good point.
Very good point, indeed. Faith, do you want to handle that to start
with? Yes. Well, we talked about this a while ago, didn't we, George, about giving away really, really good quality content. And the advice is you have to take that risk, really, because you want to stand out and you want to show that you're not the same as everybody else. And in order to do, and as we know, there's tons and tons and tons of content out there, you have to give something of real value. Unfortunately, that means that you do have to let them into your brain a little bit for free in the hope that someone will then want to buy from you. And it is a risk to take. But if you think about it in the right way and you target the right people and you make sure that it's not, I mean, no one is ever going to be able to do this stuff themselves that you're doing. You just can't replicate that. The idea is to give people enough that they're dangerous almost. So you give them so much information that they're actually slightly overwhelmed by it and worried about doing it themselves, which sounds a bit mean, but that's sort of the idea with it really is that it's so valuable and it's so high tech that they're actually now, they have no option but to phone you up and speak to you because they can't do anything with it. So it's got their attention, but it's nothing that they could then go off and do themselves, really. I'm trying to think of an example when they would be able to do that. And maybe, Wayne, you could mention that where someone could go off and just do the work online themselves with Hargreaves. But as long as you give them something which is obviously tied to you and the way you do it. So it's not just a piece of advice or information that's helpful, but you show them why you do it and what you bring to it. That's what I would suggest. It's not just something that they could go off and do themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And
also you could gate the best content. That's the other thing to say is that the best content should be behind the email. I mean, of course you have to create good content across the board in terms of it's comprehensive, it's articulate, but the best stuff should at least be gated behind an email. And of course that doesn't prevent someone from being a time waster. They always exist, unfortunately, and they'll exist in every industry. But that's another good thing is make sure you don't, you make sure that at least on the open part of your website, there isn't the best stuff. They've got to at least put their email address in.
Yeah. And that's a good point. There's different levels of content. And once people see that you have this sort of inner circle and this gated content, then it's even more intriguing because you think, wow, if they're giving this away for free, what am I going to get when I go inside here? So psychologically, it's quite a good thing to do anyway. And you just have to take the hit that you're maybe giving away your best ideas or one or two. I mean, I'm sure you'll have enough content. So it's only one piece.
Yes. Faith, I think we should probably wrap up because we're slightly over time already.
Okay, right. Yes, we are. That's good. I think people seem to have enjoyed it and it seems to be useful. So if you would like to continue the conversation, please just drop us a line and we'd be happy to chat to you further.
Absolutely. And you can go to that link in the chat just there to book a call with us if you'd like to speak to us about it in person as well. No problem.
And we'll send out the recording of this on Monday, so you'll be able to go through it all in more detail.
Absolutely.
if you wish. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.